So, after having lifted your spirits after lunch, Africa is entering a new era, and there are many signs on the wall that it's not likely to be a peaceful one unless we do a number of things. And there are 5 things I want to highlight. The first is we need to go beyond bilateralism and focus a lot more of our attention, both foreign assistance and engagement, on regional communities and civil society organizations. Is this easy to do? Absolutely not. The regional organizations have institutional, they have resourcing, they have capacity problems. Civil society organizations, they are as numerous and as diverse as they come. However, in most African countries, when it comes to both economic development and security and stability, these are constituencies that matter greatly. And if we want to be able to exercise our leverage, we have to think creatively about how we engage those constituencies. Secondly, we need to go beyond aid. As I mentioned earlier, it's becoming increasingly irrelevant. And here's where we have to do 2 important things. One, we need to highlight partnerships a lot more. Partnerships that are private sector-led. Yes, private sector-led. The World Investment Report shows that most of the new investment money going into the African continent in volume terms comes from the United States, not from China. So we have to think strategically about how we partner, and we have to think more about effects than outputs. I know we talk a lot about this conceptually, but in reality, what is it we're trying to accomplish with our assistance? Whether it's project assistance or technical assistance, what is it we're trying to do? And let's try and design interventions that align accordingly. Thirdly, we need to go beyond traditional security assistance. For too long, we have trained and equipped on the African continent. And I know, people think, oh, you're beating up on the train and equip. Train and equip is good, but it is not sufficient. And it's particularly problematic when you think about Africa in the outer years for 2 reasons. One, in many cases, the state is complicit and is also a perpetrator of violence. And secondly, in most cases, the threats, if you do a threat analysis, the threats are not threats to sovereignty. They are law and order internal threats. And so we need to think creatively about how we go beyond training, equip the military to ensuring that we have a security sector architecture that makes sense, that is owned regionally, and that also is sustainable. Fourth, and Michelle already mentioned this, we need to go beyond interests and highlight coordination, not just with others, but within the US interagency, and also alignment with development goals in the countries. And lastly, we need to go beyond poverty when it comes to economic and welfare issues. Generally, we look at Africa and we think poverty. If you look at the quantum of remittance flows to the African continent on an annual basis, it's more than 2 times the amount of aid received. So when you do your GDP per capita calculations, most of these aren't captured. And the households are slightly more liquid than we think they are on a sustained basis. And so we have this growing consumer class. We have the emerging millennials. We have this nascent middle class, about 10, 15%, we're told. By going beyond poverty, we have to think about how we strengthen the agency of the consuming class and also of the emerging middle class, because those are your change makers and those are your policy sustainers. And looking forward next 10, 15 years, Africa will have entered a new era. And I think it's up to African countries and partners like the United States to make sure that it is indeed a peaceful and prosperous one for all Africans. Thank you.